Xiaoxi was cruelly abandoned by her birth mother as a child, left to fend for herself in the countryside. After her father passed away, her mother remarried. For a full 20 years, she never felt a shred of familial warmth. Who would have known that 20 years later, her unscrupulous mother would suddenly bring her back to the city, only to have her take her stepsister's place and leap into a pit of fire? The person she was to marry was none other than the man with paralyzed legs, rumored to be infertile and in a vegetative state, the Hua family's infamous good-for-nothing, second young master Hua Xingzhou. But as fate would have it, on the night of her wedding, an accidental kiss miraculously awakened the sleeping man. At this moment, Xiaoxi, dressed in a faded floral dress, sat anxiously in the lavish villa, looking completely out of place. Before her, her birth mother, whom she hadn't seen in 20 years and was adorned with gold and silver, clutched her hand tightly, putting on a tearful, sorrowful act. Cici, you've suffered so much in the countryside. Now that you're marrying into the Hua family, you can finally enjoy a life of comfort. Xiaoxi's heart twinged with a sharp pain. The faint hope for a mother's love she once held in her heart instantly shattered like a bubble. She fought back the tears welling in her eyes, her voice trembling uncontrollably. Mom, I'm her biological daughter. Are you really going to make me take my stepsister's place and marry that man from the Hua family who's in a vegetative state after a car accident? Zhao Yuzhen cried even more miserably, as if she were the one who had been wrong. I have no choice either. Marrying into a family as a stepmother looks glamorous to outsiders, but in reality, I have my own difficulties. I gave birth to you after all. Just think of it as helping mom and marrying in your stepsister's place. Xiaoxi took a deep breath, the corners of her eyes turning slightly red. Back then, Zhao Yuzhen had ruthlessly abandoned her in her swaddling clothes, running off to the Su family to become a stepmother and doting on the Su family's daughter like the apple of her eye. Yet, she completely ignored her own daughter. She had thought that returning to the city this time meant her mother wanted to make up for the past 22 years of neglect. She never expected her mother only wanted to squeeze out the last of her value. At this thought, large teardrops fell from Xiaoxi's face on her tightly clenched fists. Fine, I'll marry him. She gritted her teeth, deciding to treat it as repaying her mother for the debt of giving birth to her. Zhao Yuzhen's tears instantly turned into a smile, her expression changing faster than flipping a book. That's wonderful. I knew you were the most obedient. The Hua family specially prepared a wedding dress. I'll go get it for you now. She bustled about joyfully, her eyes filled only with the thrill of achieving her goal. She didn't care in the slightest how she had fared all these years, only wanting to quickly get rid of this hot potato. Just then, she caught a glimpse of the top of the stairs out of the corner of her eye. She saw her stepsister, Su Weiwei, standing there, a smug look on her face. She silently mouthed to her, "Poor thing with no mother." Then, she added in a passive-aggressive tone, "Stepmother, I don't think she is very willing. Won't you be wronging her by making your own daughter marry in her place?" Zhao Yuzhen quickly replied in a fawning manner. How could that be? This is her good fortune. Even in a vegetative state, the second young Master Hua is from a prestigious family she could never hope to marry into. How could she live such a good life in the countryside? Xiaoxi's heart turned completely cold. She finally understood that in her mother's heart, she wasn't a daughter at all, just a burden that could be discarded at any time. Just then, a maid hurried over to remind her, "Madam, the car from the Hua family to pick up the bride is already waiting at the door." Zhao Yuzhen urged her repeatedly, "Cici, hurry up. Don't keep the Hua family waiting." Xiaoxi's hands hung limply at her sides, her fingers tightly clutching the worn-out medicine box she had brought from the countryside. With a look of disgust, Zhao Yuzhen reached out to snatch it. "Don't take this piece of junk to the Hua family. You'll be a laughingstock." Xiaoxi nimbly sidestepped, causing Zhao Yuzhen to stumble and nearly fall. Xiaoxi stared at her coldly. "These are my personal belongings. You have no right to dispose of them. This is the last time." She snatched the wedding dress from her mother's hands. Her bright, pretty face was filled with determination. "From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other." After speaking, she strode out of the Su family home without a backward glance. The car sped along, finally stopping at the Hua family mansion. She was then taken to a dressing room to be meticulously styled. She looked at the unfamiliar and weary reflection of herself in the mirror. she silently encouraged herself in her heart. Since I've chosen this path, I'll forget all the past pain and treat this as the start of a new life. Dressed in the wedding gown, she was breathtakingly beautiful, but her smile held endless bitterness. Afterwards, she was led into a spacious bedroom and sat quietly by the bed. A pastor held a Bible, his face solemn. "We are gathered here today in the presence of God and these witnesses to join together Huoxingzhou and Xiao, she in matrimony." The surrounding relatives immediately burst into chatter, whispering amongst themselves. Sai, the second young master, was originally so capable, the most promising candidate to become the head of the family. Who would have thought he'd get into a car accident a month ago and end up like this? Then someone else chimed in. "I heard he even lost his ability to have children." I think the second madam was at her wits' end to believe in this nonsense about a cleansing marriage. At this rate, the second branch of the Hua family is probably going to be completely suppressed by the first branch. Xiao, she secretly glanced at the man on the bed. So this is the Hua family's second young master, Huoxingzhou. He was actually very handsome, with sharp brows, defined eyes, and a high-bridged nose, but his eyes were tightly shut. His pale complexion couldn't help but evoke pity. What a shame for such an outstanding person to now be an unconscious man in a vegetative state. Fate is truly cruel. In the evening, a servant from the second branch of the Hua family, Aunt Qian, came forward, looking at her kindly. "I'll put away the veil for you now." She nodded slightly. "Thank you, Aunt Qian." Seeing how well-behaved and sensible she was, Aunt Qian couldn't help but add a reminder. "Tonight is your wedding night. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the young master. Call me if you need anything." After saying this, Aunt Qian gently closed the door and left. It wasn't until the footsteps faded away that she let out a long sigh, her nerves, which had been tense all day, finally relaxing. She lowered her gaze to the motionless man on the bed, a pang of sympathy for a fellow sufferer rising in her heart. Actually, none of us have it easy. Then, she stood up and stretched widely, trying to relieve the backache from sitting for so long. Who knew that because her legs were numb, her footing gave way and she lost control, tumbling forward. She landed on the man's warm chest. Her two soft, red lips, by a stroke of sheer coincidence, pressed against his cheek. The man beneath her had skin as fair as jade, so handsome it was hard to look away. However, the bright red lipstick mark on his cheek instantly ruined his original aloof, ascetic aura. Xiaoxi's cheeks instantly burned bright red. In her panic, she was about to push herself up to wipe the lipstick mark off for him. Unexpectedly, her hair got hopelessly tangled in the collar of the man's pajamas. No matter how she tried, she couldn't get it free. She gasped from sharp pain, her scalp burning. In her frantic struggle, her red lips kept brushing against the man's cool, thin lips, kissing him again and again. If the Hua family were to walk in on this, they would surely curse her to the bone, calling her shameless for not even sparing a man in a vegetative state. She looked at the unconscious man before her. She put her hands together, as if in prayer. "Sorry, I have no other choice." Left with no alternative, she threw caution to the wind and straddled the man's waist. She grabbed his collar with both hands and pulled hard. With a sharp tearing sound, the expensive silk shirt was ripped open. Buttons scattered across the floor with a clatter. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. It's finally untangled. But when she looked down, the man's perfect physique was instantly exposed to the air. His six-pack abs were clearly defined. It was enough to make one's face flush and heart race. She quickly shook her head, silently cursing herself for her impure thoughts. But she never expected that at this very moment, the man lying on the bed like a corpse would slowly open his deep, cold eyes. His voice was hoarse, yet carried a bone-chilling coldness. "How long do you plan on riding me?" She was just a bride for a cleansing ritual, yet she was forced to give her vegetative husband a sponge bath. Not even his private parts could be spared. But after checking his pulse, she was shocked to find it was as strong as a dragon or a tiger, not at all like a dying man's. However, the moment her hand slipped under the covers, the man who was supposed to be unconscious suddenly grabbed her hand and weakly spoke 5 words. On the lifeless bed, the man who had been as still as a corpse slowly lifted his eyelids, revealing a pair of unfathomably deep eyes glinting with a cold light. "How long do you plan on riding me?" She was so frightened by this sudden, ghostly voice that her soul nearly left her body. Her almond eyes widened instantly, and she subconsciously clapped a hand over her mouth. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest. He's awake. But when she looked closer, still shaken. The man on the bed still had his eyes tightly shut, his breathing steady and even. Only then did she let out a long sigh, laughing at herself for probably being so tired she was hearing things. She steadied her nerves, then, pinching the corner of her sleeve, she carefully wiped the glaring lipstick mark from Hua Xingzhou's cheek. Next, she gently straightened his pajamas and with a guilty conscience, pulled the blanket up, tucking the man in tightly. Only then did she carefully lie down on the edge of the bed. Within a few minutes, she couldn't fight off the heavy drowsiness and fell fast asleep. Little did she know that just as her breathing became deep and even, her new husband, the rumored vegetative man, opened his eyes again, his gaze deep and inscrutable as he stared at her back. The morning's golden sunlight had just spread across the windowsill when Xiao Shi's sweet dream was shattered by commotion. She groggily forced her eyes open and saw Aunt Qian standing by the bed with a basin, giving orders with a serious expression. "Young madam, please give the young master a sponge bath." Sponge bath? Xiao Shi's mind went blank as she repeated the words, her eyes filled with resistance. But Aunt Qian kept a straight face, speaking in a businesslike tone. She stated that although a caregiver used to do it, now that he had a caring wife, there was naturally no need for an outsider's help. Her tone was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Helpless, Xiaoxi had no choice but to resignedly take the towel and swish it in the warm water. She gently placed it on the man's handsome, untroubled face, seeing that his eyes were still tightly shut, with not even a flicker of his eyelashes. Xiaoxi felt relieved. Last night really was just an illusion. How could a man in a vegetative state possibly speak? Aunt Qian supervised from the side like a hawk as she watched the towel glide over the man's eyebrows, thin lips, Adam's apple, and then continue down to wipe his chest. Suddenly, Xiaoxi snatched her hand back as if burned, her cheeks instantly flushing. This is too improper, she thought. But on second thought, she just had to treat him like one of the patients in the countryside who needed treatment. Seeing her movements pause, Aunt Qian promptly reminded her, "The young master is a neat freak. You must be thorough. Afterwards, you also need to give him a full-body massage to prevent muscle atrophy." Xiaoxi secretly felt fortunate. Luckily, she had obtained a physical therapy and rehabilitation certificate before. This was right up her alley. However, when the pad of her finger unintentionally rested on the man's wrist, a strong, powerful pulse instantly shot through her fingertip, making her gasp. The next second, she immediately focused, held her breath, and seriously took his pulse. Aunt Qian, seeing this, leaned over to ask. Xiaoxi quickly shook her head to cover it up and stood up, but a thin layer of sweat had broken out on her back. "This pulse is as strong as a dragon or a tiger. How is this like a dying man?" Just then, Aunt Qian coldly handed her another wet towel, adding expressionlessly, "There's still his lower body." Which lower body? She felt a rush of blood go straight to her head, and even her ears turned so red they felt like they would bleed. Aunt Qian glanced at her calmly, stating bluntly, "You're legally married, so you're husband and wife. No need to be shy." She even generously stuffed the new towel into her hand, her gaze like she was looking at a naive little girl who had never seen the world. She clutched the towel, standing by the bed, a war raging in her mind. A little devil screamed, "That's a strange man," but a little angel consoled, "That's your poor, sick husband." In the end, her professional ethics as a healer won out. Grandpa Chung used to say, "A healer has no desires and sees all beings as equal." She steeled her heart and gritted her teeth. The hand holding the towel tentatively reached deep under the covers, moving down along the man's firm abdominal lines. At the critical moment, a large, warm hand suddenly clamped down on her wrist with astonishing strength. A weak but slightly annoyed male voice sounded next to her ear. "No need to wipe my lower body." Clang! The basin in Aunt Qian's hands fell to the floor, the loud noise echoing through the room. Xiaoxi was completely thunderstruck, frozen in place like a wooden chicken. Only one thought spun wildly in her mind. Hua Xingzhou has come back from the dead. This Hua Xingzhou, who had long been rumored by the outside world to have become a vegetable, had unexpectedly opened his eyes the next morning. This sudden, zombie-like revival left Xiaoxi, who was by the bed, completely thunderstruck. It was Aunt Qian beside her who reacted first, screaming with excitement as she rushed out of the room. "Madam, the young master is awake." Xiaoxi finally snapped back to her senses, instantly overwhelmed with shame. She clutched the wet towel tightly, gesturing frantically and shyly. I was just following Aunt Qian's instructions to give you a sponge bath." Unexpectedly, Hua Xingzhou stared at her, accusing her word by word. Last night, you secretly kissed me many times. His words struck Qiao Shi's heart like a heavy hammer. She was so embarrassed she wished she could find a block of tofu and smash her head against it. Before long, the bedroom was filled with a group of people in white coats. They quickly surrounded Hua Xingzhou and began their examination. The unimportant people were squeezed out the door. Qiao Shi was also pushed out with the crowd. She leaned against the corner, letting out a long breath, secretly relieved. At least she didn't have to face the mortifying Hua Xingzhou alone anymore. The madam is here. Following the announcement, the crowded hallway automatically parted to make way. A noble lady in a simple cheongsam, with an elegant temperament, walked gracefully over. This was Hua Xingzhou's biological mother, the Hua family's second madam, Duan. Duan's scrutinizing gaze had just landed on Qiao Shi when she asked softly, "You must be Qiao Shi." Qiao Shi subconsciously straightened up, her tense palms sweating. She bowed slightly. "Hello, madam." As she spoke, her heart was pounding, wildly guessing if the other party was here to condemn her. Who knew that the second Madame Hua would suddenly smile warmly? Looking at her with gentleness and sincerity, she said, "You are very good." Then, she took Qiao Shi's hand, exclaiming repeatedly, "It's all thanks to you that Xingzhou was able to wake up." Before she finished speaking, she took off the imperial green jadeite bracelet with excellent translucency from her own wrist and, without another word, slipped it onto Qiao Shi's. Qiao Shi was so startled, she quickly tried to pull back. "Madam, this is too valuable." But Duan gently patted her hand, her eyes full of kindness. "Good child, don't refuse. This is a meeting gift for my daughter-in-law." Qiao Shi licked her dry lips, hesitating for a moment before finally mustering the courage to confess. "Madame Hua, actually, I'm not from the Su family." She knew very well that she was just a substitute bride, a fake, not the Su family's daughter they originally wanted. Who knew that Duan would sigh lightly, her expression calm. "I know. Su Hong sent a stepdaughter over because he saw that our second branch was losing power but is starving. Camel is still bigger than a horse. Xingzhou holds a major project in his hands. There will be a day when he makes a comeback." As she spoke, her gaze locked firmly on Qiao Shi. "In any case, from this day forward, you're the only daughter-in-law I, Duan, will acknowledge. From now on, I'll be relying on you to take care of Xingzhou. You are a person of great fortune. Let him share in some of it." Seeing the sincerity in Duan's eyes, Qiao Shi's eyes instantly grew moist. In her memory, everyone in the village had called her a jinx, an unlucky charm, even a lone star of calamity who caused her father's death and drove her mother away. This was the very first time anyone had ever praised her for having good fortune. This warm current of acceptance instantly enveloped her entire body. "From now on, call me Mom. His father is busy cleaning up the mess, and his sister went to the temple to pray for a peace talisman. We'll have a proper family meal another day," Duan said with a smile, comforting Qiao Shi. She nodded vigorously in agreement, a sense of belonging she had never felt before welling up in her heart. Just then, the lead doctor pushed open the door. "Madam, the second young master's cranial nerves are fine, but there's extensive blood congestion in the bone marrow of his legs, and he has no sensation. The surgical risk is extremely high." "Du roi n'est pas change de drasticalité?" she asked in disbelief. "So there's no cure?" The doctor spread his hands helplessly. "I'm very sorry. Unless you can get the preeminent medical expert, Master Chang Han. He's the only one with successful cases." Madame Hua didn't hesitate. "Then go and invite him quickly." But the doctor shook his head and sighed. Master Chung retired and went into seclusion many years ago. There's been no news of him. The hope of finding him is slim. Listening to this, Qiao Shi, who was standing to the side, felt her mind start to work. She secretly thought that she might have a way to treat his legs. Just as she was hesitating whether to speak up, her phone, in her pocket, suddenly vibrated. "Qiao," she glanced at the name, flashing frantically on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly excused herself to Duan and walked quickly to a dark corner of the stairwell. She answered the call. Immediately, Zhao Yuzhen's seemingly gentle but actually probing voice came through. "Cici, I heard the second young master Hua is awake. Are his legs really crippled?" A cold sneer rose in Xiao Shi's heart. The doctor here had just given the diagnosis, and the Su family had already received the news. Their network was appallingly fast. What chilled her to the bone was that Zhao Yuzhen, her own mother, didn't care at all whether she lived or died in the Hua family. She didn't even ask how she survived the hellish scene last night. Her mind was only filled with prying for information. At this thought, Xiaoxi's heart turned completely cold. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. Unexpectedly, Zhao Yuzhen grew anxious. Wait, help your sister. Hua Xingzhou has a major collaboration project with the Tianyuan group. As long as you can sweet-talk him into signing the project transfer agreement, your sister can successfully marry the eldest young Master Hua. Then you two can even be sisters-in-law. Xiaoxi almost laughed out of anger at this shameless logic. Suppressing the rage churning in her chest, she let out a scornful laugh. What makes you think I can help with this? I'm a nobody in the whole family. I have no say in anything. I can't do this job. Who knew that Zhao Yuzhen would instantly drop her pretense, her voice becoming sharp and piercing? I don't care. To tell you the truth, that old woman from the countryside has already been brought to the Su family home. If you don't agree, you can forget about ever seeing her again in this lifetime. Xiaoxi's voice was unsteady with extreme anger. Are you even human? Not my grandmother, and she was your mother-in-law. But Zhao Yuzhen said coldly, your father died long ago. That old woman has absolutely no blood relation to me. Xiaoxi asked, holding back her emotions, what about me? Am I still your biological daughter? The other end of the line fell into a deathly silence. It was followed by Zhao Yuzhen's utterly cold verdict. Wei Wei is the socialite I painstakingly raised. Her family background and talents are all top-notch. If you can marry the second young master of the Hua family, of course she has to marry someone even more prestigious than you. I'll be waiting for your good news on the day of your bridal return visit. Otherwise, that old woman is getting on in years. I can't say for sure if some accident might happen. Xiaoxi married a man with paralyzed legs in her stepsister's place. Even touching the man's finger was an extravagant hope. But on the first day of their marriage, she lifted the blanket and pulled down his pants right in front of him. Just as the man thought she had ulterior motives, she revealed a shocking secret. Just after hanging up the call with Zhao Yuzhen, Aunt Qian's familiar figure suddenly appeared in her line of sight. Young madam, what are you doing hiding here? Xiaoxi's heart trembled. She lowered her eyelids to hide her emotions. Nothing. Unexpectedly, Aunt Qian didn't notice anything unusual about her. The young master is awake and needs attending to. Come back with me quickly. Xiaoxi could only suppress her troubled thoughts and follow Aunt Qian back to the room, who knew that as soon as she entered, Madame Hua affectionately pulled her to the bedside. This is Xiaoxi, the wife you married while you were in a coma. Her gaze unexpectedly met Hua Xingzhou's icy eyes. Xiaoxi instantly recalled last night's absurd events. Her cheeks burned, and she lowered her head in embarrassment and indignation. After what happened last night, this man must think she was a shameless hussy who took advantage of him. However, the next second, the man coldly and decisively uttered one word: divorce. Xiaoxi snapped her head up, staring at him in shock and disbelief. At the same time, Duan, beside her, instantly lost control, retorting sharply, no. Xiaoxi is your lifesaver. What if something happens to you after a divorce? Are you still thinking about that little slut? Who harmed you? Hua Xingzhou's expression didn't change, but his tone was filled with hopeless self-mockery. Mother, even though I'm awake, I'm still a cripple, with paralyzed legs and having lost my inheritance rights. Why should I drag someone else down? Madame Hua's eyes instantly reddened, fighting back a sob. She comforted him, it will get better. As long as we find Master Cheng, with the resources in your hands, we can definitely make a comeback. Then have you asked this young lady? Hua Xingzhou's gaze locked onto Xiaoxi. Is she willing to be a widow with a living husband? As soon as he said this, Xiaoxi felt extremely uncomfortable, her cheeks so red they could bleed. The embarrassing scenes from last night flashed through her mind again. This man can't possibly think I'm some sex-crazed woman, can he? Madame Hua turned to Xiaoxi, her face full of guilt. Xiaoxi, are you willing to stay with Xingzhou? Although the second branch has fallen on hard times, my dowry is enough for our family to live without worry. Xiaoxi bit her red lip, her heart instantly thrown into turmoil. Zhao Yuzhen was using her grandmother's life as leverage, forcing her to get the major project from Hua Xingzhou. But that was the second branch's only hope for a comeback. How could she repay their kindness with malice and personally extinguish the Hua family's hope? But if she didn't agree, what would happen to her grandmother? Her silence, in the eyes of the Hua mother and son, seemed to have become a silent refusal. The man on the bed seemed to have seen through everything. He calmly passed a death sentence on their relationship. We'll go through the procedures tomorrow. Xiaoxi was suddenly jolted to her senses and blurted out, I won't divorce. Since I've already married him, I should share his honor and disgrace. If even I betray him, this man would be too pitiful. Facing Hua Xingzhou's murderous, icy gaze, she took a deep breath, mustered her courage, and shouted, I've already married you. I'll accept being a widow with a living husband. And Madame Hua's anxious heart finally settled. Good child, I knew you were different from those people outside. And Qian, let's go. Don't disturb the young couple from nurturing their relationship. Before she finished speaking, the two of them slipped out of the room as if their feet were greased. Hua Xingzhou suddenly said, Miss Qiao, if you want money, I can give it to you. But my mother's dowry was lost in the stock market long ago. She was lying to you. Xiaoxi quickly waved her hands. I'm not after money. The scenes from last night flashed through Hua Xingzhou's mind again. He warned through gritted teeth, now that I'm awake, I will absolutely not tolerate you messing around. A widow with a living husband means you can't even think about touching a single one of my fingers, not even to satisfy your cravings. Xiaoxi's face instantly turned as red as a ripe tomato. She wished she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Kissing and hugging had become satisfying cravings in his mouth. She muttered a rebuttal under her breath. I didn't. Besides, you can't even do it. The man's face changed drastically, a dangerous storm brewing in his eyes. What did you say? Xiaoxi shrank back in fear. Then she declared that she was confident she could cure his legs. The man let out a disdainful sneer and pointed to the door, gesturing for her to get out. But Xiaoxi stood her ground stubbornly. I'm not lying. I'll prove it to you right now. As soon as the words left her mouth, she strode forward, whipped off the blanket covering Hua Xingzhou, and then, without hesitation, pulled down his pajama pants. Her movements were fluid and decisive. In an instant, his long, muscular, well-defined legs were exposed to the air. Hua Xingzhou was instantly enraged, but Xiaoxi paid no mind to his thunderous rage. Her fingers quickly and accurately pressed down hard on an acupoint on Hua Xingzhou's leg. This press seemed to flip a switch. His legs, which had been completely numb, were suddenly filled with a dense, tingling sensation, as if millions of ants were gnawing at them. Xiaoxi stared at him intently, asking, Do you feel anything? Hua Xingzhou turned his head away, his face still maintaining a blank expression, but his brows furrowed uncontrollably. Seeing this reaction, Xiaoxi instantly knew. These legs can be saved. It's good that you feel something. I'll bet my life on it. I can definitely cure your legs. As long as you persist with daily massages to clear the blood stasis and take my exclusive herbal medicine, you'll be able to stand and walk again in as little as a month or half a year at most. As these words fell, Hua Xingzhou's long-dead heart felt as if it had been lightly brushed by a feather, sending ripples across it. But reason instantly returned. No one helps another person for no reason. He lifted his eyelids and scrutinized her coldly. What do you want? Xiaoxi's fingertips paused. A look of awkwardness she found hard to voice flashed across her face. Gritting her teeth, she confessed, My grandmother has been taken to Haicheng by the Su family. They're using the old woman as a bargaining chip. They want the major collaboration project with the Tianyuan group that you have, so that Su Weiwei can have a grand wedding with your cousin. The corner of Hua Xingzhou's mouth instantly curved into a sarcastic smile. Just as he had guessed, she was also after the second branch's assets. Sharply catching the mockery in his eyes, Xiaoxi's heart went cold, and an indescribable sense of loss washed over her. Sorry, Ive overstep. It makes sense, she thought. How could Hua Xingzhou possibly agree to give up such an important resource? And then there's his original fiancée. Hua Xingzhou stared at her retreating back, which looked like she was fleeing in defeat, a dark storm brewing in the depths of his eyes. Then, he picked up the phone from the bedside table and dialed a number. The call was answered almost instantly. A man's devil-may-care, teasing voice came from the other end. Well, the second young master who finally deigns to contact me. Done playing the vegetable, are we? Hua Xingzhou had no time to banter with him. He gave a concise order. Prepare a top-secret file for me on the collaboration between Tianyuan Group and the Hua family. Remember to tamper with it a little. On the other end of the line, Zhou Yu instantly dropped his playful demeanor. No problem. By the way, a reminder. Your car accident wasn't simple, but all traces have vanished. I can't find any evidence. No need to trouble the police. I know who the mastermind is. It can't be that good-for-nothing cousin of yours again, can it? Zhou Yu cursed on the spot. That son of a bitch has no skills, only dirty tricks. The file you want prepared. You're not giving it to him, are you? In that case, I'll have to tamper with it a bit more. Hua Xingzhou directly cut off his rambling. Don't worry about that. Look into someone else for me. Who? Xiao Shi. Zhou Yu's tone held a hint of ambiguity. Oh, your new wife for warding off bad luck. Hua Xingzhou didn't refute the title. Investigate her life and background. See if she has any connection to the eldest branch. Having just married into a wealthy family, her mother-in-law took her on a wild shopping spree. A single dress cost nearly 20,000 yuan, and she wanted to buy it in every color without batting an eye. But just then, a tactless wealthy woman came up to mock her. Her husband is a cripple. The vast family fortune will sooner or later change hands. Seeing her mother-in-law about to lose the argument, she suddenly stepped forward and retorted neither humbly nor arrogantly. One should leave some leeway when dealing with others. Zhou Yu exclaimed with worry, every word filled with suspicion that she was a spy planted by the eldest branch. He even clamored about hiring bodyguards for 24-hour close protection. However, Hua Xingzhou had no mood to listen to that noisy nonsense. Before the other party could finish, he directly hung up the phone. His eyes were half lowered, revealing a bottomless darkness. After all, in this world, there's no such thing as a free lunch. At this moment, the image of that stubborn yet radiant new wife involuntarily appeared in his mind. Just when his legs had become a problem, this bride sent by the Su family had confidently vowed that she could cure his legs. What was even more interesting was her face. Meanwhile, on the other side, Duan discovered that Xiao Shi had arrived with very little luggage. So without a second word, she enthusiastically pulled her straight to the mall. It was clear she intended to buy her a whole new wardrobe from head to toe. The moment they stepped into the mall, this wealthy madam instantly switched to a frantic shopping mode, pointing at one gorgeous outfit after another without stopping. She even wished she could buy a set in every color. Xiaoxi's heart skipped a beat. She secretly glanced at the number on the price tag. The glaringly written 19,999 nearly made her suffocate. This was a huge sum that she couldn't spend in over half a year in the countryside. If she were to buy it, the little savings she had probably wouldn't even cover a fraction of the cost. She was so scared that she repeatedly waved her hands and refused. But Duan smiled and held her hand down. She said earnestly, "A girl should be more refined. Since you're my daughter-in-law, you're half a daughter to me. There's no need for such formality between mother and daughter." As these words fell, a glimmer of emotion welled up in Xiaoxi's eyes. So this was what family care felt like. It could be so heartwarming. Following that, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law swept through the clothing store and then moved on to the jewelry store. But unexpectedly, someone tactless just had to come over and make their presence known. A wealthy woman dripping with gold and silver approached with a strange, sarcastic tone, her face full of mocking laughter. "Second Madame Hua, you're still in mood to go shopping?" Her words were filled with schadenfreude, directly pointing out that even if Hua Xingzhou woke up, he'd still be a cripple. The inheritance rights of the Hua family would sooner or later fall into the hands of the eldest branch. Xiaoxi had thought that people in wealthy circles would have some decorum. She never expected them to be even more snobbish and cold-blooded than common city folk. Seeing Hua Xingzhou being bullied like a tiger stranded on a plane, anger flared in her heart. She suddenly stepped forward to stand in front of Du Wan and retorted neither humbly nor arrogantly. One should leave some leeway when dealing with others. After all, Hua Xingzhou is recovering. Once he takes power in the future, who's to say he won't give special attention to this madam's family business? Beside her, Duwan's eyes were crinkled with smiles. She cheered inwardly. As expected of the daughter-in-law she had personally chosen. That Mrs. Sun was choked by these words, her face turning red. Humiliated and enraged, she spat out a vicious curse. Even if Hua Xingzhou stands up, he won't be able to have children. The vast family fortune will have no one to inherit it. Hearing this, Duwan sneered and mercilessly exposed her weakness on the spot, retorting sarcastically that Mrs. Sun's son was the one who was truly useless. "I heard he's impotent and takes random pills. He was just carried into the hospital 2 days ago. Let's hope he doesn't actually die on top of a woman one day." Mrs. Sun flustered and exasperated, wanted to make a threat, claiming they would find Master Ching sooner or later and telling them not to come begging then. But Duan looked completely unfazed, stating directly that her Xingzhou was a blessed person. Who knows, the miracle doctor might even come to us himself. After this war of words, Madame Hua was clearly the victor. Mrs. Sun's face was a mixture of pale and ghastly. In the end, she could only play her trump card, the land she held. She threatened, "Let's see how Hua Xingzhou resolves the project crisis." Then, she stormed off in defeat with her bag. She secretly clicked her tongue in amazement. She never thought that the seemingly elegant second Madame's combat power would be off the charts when she argued. In the blink of an eye, Duan had quickly composed herself. She turned and pointed to the unique sapphire necklace in the top glass case, asking the sales associate to take it out. Before she could react, the teardrop-shaped sapphire pendant was already on her neck. The brilliant lights complemented her skin, which was as fair as snow, as if her whole being was enveloped in a soft glow. Madame Hua's eyes were full of admiration. She took the opportunity to correct her form of address again, telling her to call her mom. She was just about to reach up and take off the precious gift, but was stopped by second Madame Hua. She even used the excuse of having Hua Xingzhou keep it for her, claiming that once his legs were cured, the young couple could dispose of it as they pleased. Left with no choice, she could only nod. Seeing this, Duan immediately told the sales associate to wrap it up. Just then, an idea struck Xiaoxi. She took the opportunity to ask about the mysterious Master Cheng, wondering who he was. It feels like all the powerful people in Haicheng are searching the world for one person. Hearing this, Duan's expression became solemn. When she mentioned the name Cheng Han, her eyes were full of reverence. He is a titan in the medical world. His unique massage skills are said to bring the dead back to life. No matter how difficult the case, in his hands, the illness will be cured. However, this miracle doctor vanished at the age of 60. People only know he retired, but not where he went. It's only rumored that he left a disciple in the world. Now, if we can't find the master himself, finding that disciple would be a blessing in disguise. After listening, she nodded thoughtfully. The image of her neighbor in the countryside, Grandpa Cheng, instantly appeared in her mind. Back then, when the meridians in her legs were blocked, she had relied on the massage techniques she learned from him to make a full recovery. But on second thought, she felt she was being fanciful. After all, besides having Cheng in his name, that Grandpa Cheng didn't seem like a prominent figure in any way. How could a renowned doctor of his generation live in seclusion in such a poor, remote place? Just then, a hurried ringing of a cell phone broke the silence. Duan had just answered the phone, and it was unclear what was said on the other end. Her originally rosy complexion instantly turned ashen. She gritted her teeth and roared into the phone, "Tell that bastard." Then she frantically urged the driver to hurry back. Following that, the car sped all the way back to the villa. As soon as they entered, they saw Aunt Qian coming to greet them with a panicked face. The eldest young master brought a doctor and forced his way into the young master's room. And without any explanation, he drew a large vial of blood. Hearing this, Duan felt her heart clench violently. Disregarding her image, she clutched her chest and rushed up the stairs. But as the saying goes, haste makes waste. Her high heel suddenly twisted, and she was about to fall. Xiaoxi, with quick eyes and hands, caught Duan. Ignoring the sharp pain in her own ankle, she continued forward with a limp. Just as the two of them rushed to the end of the corridor, the master bedroom door was opened from the inside. A young man wearing gold-rimmed glasses appeared, dressed head to toe in famous brands and haute couture, but it couldn't hide his aura of a refined scoundrel. The mocking curve of his lips was particularly jarring. His cold gaze roamed wantonly over Xiaoxi's body. Then he let out a sneer and maliciously teased his second aunt. "So you found a country bumpkin to ward off bad luck for him." He sighed, to think the chosen one of the past can now only be matched with a village woman. His words were filled with utter humiliation. He expressed false concern, worrying that second aunt would be desolate and homeless in her old age. "At that time, you'll have to rely on me to give you a bowl of rice to eat." Facing this blatant villainy, Xiaoxi retorted neither humbly nor arrogantly, "Mr. Hua, you should probably mind your own business first." At the same time, Duan suppressed her anger and coldly questioned what Hua Biding was up to. To test if the newlywed wife before him was a spy, the man actually asked her to change his clothes. Not only did he spread his hands as if it were a matter of course, he even mocked her, saying she was very impressive when she pulled down his pants. However, just as he pinned the woman down on the bed and demanded to know who sent her, he was subdued by her in a single move. What was even more unexpected was that, as the woman fled, she shouted something in a tearful voice that made him lose all face. Hua Baiting's voice, full of pride, was deliberately raised, as if he wanted the whole world to hear. His chin was slightly raised, his face written with the arrogance of a petty person who has gotten their way. He stated directly that he was following the old master's orders to bring a doctor to give Xingzhou a physical examination, and instead questioned if Second Aunt had misunderstood something. Duwan suppressed the surging anger in her heart and, with a frosty face, ordered him to leave. Hua Baiting paid no heed to this warning at all. Instead, he sarcastically reminded Second Aunt to watch her attitude. Then, he dropped an even bigger bombshell, showing off. The eldest branch has far more clues about the miracle doctor, Cheng Han, than the second branch. Seeing Duwan's face instantly turn deathly pale, he nodded in satisfaction. The smug smile on his lips widened infinitely. He turned and strode away. At this moment, he was in high spirits. The gloom from being completely crushed by Hua Xingzhou for years was completely swept away. In his eyes, a cripple could never inherit the Hua family. Hua Xingzhou was no longer a threat. Duwan bit her bloodless lip, watching that arrogant back disappear. Just as she was about to move, a piercing pain shot through her ankle. Xiaoxi was quick to react, immediately stepping forward and carefully helping her sit down in the corridor. Xiaoxi's long, nimble fingers skillfully moved over Duwan's ankle. She softly reassured her, "You didn't hurt the bone." As soon as she finished speaking, she secretly applied a bit of skillful force and gave it a gentle twist. The next second, Duwan was surprised to find that she could stand firmly on her feet. The pain was gone, but Duwan's eyes filled with tears. Her gaze lingered on the closed door for a moment. Then she gripped Xiaoxi's hand tightly. Her voice carried a mother's most humble plea. "Please, Xiaoxi, go in and take care of Xingzhou. A mother knows her son best." After this humiliation from Hua Baiting, someone as proud as Hua Xingzhou would never want his closest family to see his broken and pathetic side. Xiaoxi was sharp as a tack and instantly understood the meaning in Duwan's eyes. She nodded solemnly. After watching Aunt Qian help Duwan leave, she then gently turned the doorknob. The moment the door opened, a room in complete disarray came into view. The man was leaning against the edge of the bed, his profile still incomparably noble, like a deity fallen to the mortal world. Only his clothes were disheveled, and the bloodstains were shocking to see. Xiaoxi explained that her mother-in-law had asked her to come and clean up, as she bent down to pick up the fragments on the floor. Hearing the movement, Hua Xingzhou slowly turned his head. In reality, this whole mess was a realistic illusion he had deliberately created to deceive Hua Baiting. How else could he make people believe he had a mental breakdown? At this moment, he needed to test whether this woman before him was a hidden spy for the eldest branch. He asked in a chilling tone whether she was here to clean the room or to clean him up. Xiaoxi looked up abruptly, her eyes filled with shock. Hua Xingzhou didn't explain. He just coldly threw out, "I need a change." Xiaoxi didn't dare to delay and quickly fetched a set of loungewear from the walk-in closet. Hua Xingzhou nodded indifferently. Then, as if it were a matter of course, he spread his hands. Xiaoxi's cheeks instantly flushed crimson. After a moment's hesitation, she still reached out with trembling fingers and undid his buttons. As the shirt slid off, his lean, muscular, and pale torso was completely exposed to the air. The sight made her dizzy, and her heartbeat went wild as if out of control. She desperately tried to brainwash herself. After all, it wasn't the first time. She forced herself to remain calm and put the shirt on him. But when she held the pants, her eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of hesitation. Hua Xingzhou looked at her with a half-smile. He mercilessly mocked her for pretending to be innocent. "You were so impressive when you were pulling my pants off." Xiaoxi was startled, then thought to herself, "It's just changing a pair of pants, no big deal." Hua Xingzhou leaned against the bed, looking decadent and resigned to his fate. Xiaoxi's fingertips were cool and soft. When they inadvertently touched his skin, it actually caused him to tremble slightly. Then she wrung out a towel and gently wiped the bloodstains on his arm. The area around the needle mark was bruised. It was obvious that an excessive amount of blood had been maliciously drawn. Just then, Hua Xingzhou's dark gaze locked onto her profile. He suddenly reached out and seized her wrist tightly. In a dizzying spin, Xiaoxi was thrown heavily onto the wide bed. Before she could regain her senses, the man's heavy upper body pressed down on her. Then he demanded to know what benefits Hua Baiting had given her. Xiaoxi's heart clenched. She frantically retorted that she didn't know Hua Baiting at all, so he had never believed her. His previous warmth was just a game. At this moment, his right hand had already moved to her soft waist. His cold voice was tinged with a hint of roguelike behavior. Since you've stripped me twice, it's only fair that I strip you once. Xiaoxi's chest heaved violently with anger, as if she had been terribly bullied. She bit her lower lip, roaring madly in her heart. What did this man take her for? An object to be toyed with at will? As anger clouded her mind, her fingers suddenly shot out, accurately and fiercely pinching the acupoint on the man's shoulder and neck. Hua Xingzhou felt his entire arm go numb instantly. A wave of numbness caused his strength to fail, and he involuntarily loosened his grip. But Xiaoxi's movements were surprisingly fast. Taking advantage of this brief opening, she scrambled off the bed. She frantically straightened her already messy clothes. A torrent of grievance poured out. Even if you strip me naked, you still can't perform. Then, not daring to look at the man's face, she yanked open the door and fled. Just then, in the shadows at the corner of the corridor, two figures slowly emerged. TSK, look, her buttons have popped open. The other woman immediately chimed in knowingly. Her hair is messy too, and her face is so red. Could it be that the young master kissed her into a daze? Aunt Xian had a knowing, ant-like smile, giving a thumbs up and exclaiming, "The madam's honey trap plan is brilliant," sending the young madam over for close care. Isn't this just adding fuel to the fire of their relationship? A glint of cunning flashed in Du Wan's eyes. This is nothing. I know my son. He wouldn't lose out to Hua Baiting unless he did it on purpose, to force her daughter to hand over the project proposal. Her mother cruelly slapped her in public. Her stepsister from the same father even came forward to search her and snatch it away. Not only that, they also used her sick grandmother as a hostage, even grabbing the old woman's head and slamming it against the wall in front of the girl. At this moment, a hurried announcement came from outside the villa. Xiaoxi ran out the door in tears, leaving a room of silence behind her. Hua Xingzhou sat alone on the bed, rubbing his fingertips together, as if still savoring the touch. The warmth, as delicate as a marshmallow, had momentarily dazed him. Suddenly, he looked down and laughed at himself, an inexplicable annoyance welling up in his chest. What did she mean he can't perform? If he had gotten serious, with that little woman's strength, how could she have escaped unscathed? Just then, the vibration of the phone on the bedside table pulled him back to his senses. It turned out that Zhou had worked with divine speed and had already compiled a detailed file on Xiaoxi's life from childhood to the present. Hua Xingzhou casually swiped open the investigation report. The moment his eyes scanned it, his fingertips suddenly froze. The usual indifference in his eyes cracked with a trace of shock and astonishment. In the blink of an eye, the day for the bride's customary visit home arrived. Second Madame Du Wan had prepared generous gifts, but she held Xiaoxi's hand tightly, comforting her with a face full of guilt. Because Xingzhou was unwell, she would have to trouble her to return home alone. Xiaoxi nodded obediently, but the corner of her eye couldn't help but drift towards the second floor of the small villa. Thinking of yesterday's unpleasant parting, a wave of bitterness rose in her heart. Since she couldn't get the project proposal from that man, she would have to rely on herself to rescue her grandmother. With this farewell, the luxury car slowly drove away from the Hor residence. When it arrived at the Su family villa, Xiaoxi got out of the car and stared at the familiar yet strange building before her, a resolute flame burning in her eyes. She secretly vowed in her heart that today, no matter the cost, even if it meant completely breaking ties with the Su family, she would take her grandmother away from this sea of suffering. Xiaoxi stepped into the living room with heavy steps. The laughter that had filled the room instantly died. When Zhao Yuzhen saw her, she immediately put on a fake, enthusiastic smile and came forward, asking why the second young master hadn't accompanied her. But on the sofa, Su Weiwei raised her chin with disdainful eyes, mercilessly mocking. Does a country girl deserve to be accompanied by Hua Xingzhou? How embarrassing. Seeing this, Su Hung at the side hurriedly played the good cop, gesturing for Xiaoxi to sit and have tea while spouting platitudes about being one family, trying to smooth things over. Zhao Yuzhen took the cue, her mouth saying they were like real sisters. But her eyes were full of calculation. She eagerly inquired about the Hua family's second branch and any news of Master Chung Han. After all, she had been married into the Su family for years without a son and had long coveted the legendary fertility secret. Xiao, she sneered inwardly. This family only put on a human face when there was something to gain. Their hypocrisy was simply nauseating. So, without even lifting her eyelids, she shot back, "Are you sick?" Who knew that this sentence would instantly hit Zhao Yuzhen's sore spot? She was overcome with rage and raised her hand to deliver a vicious slap. She shrieked curses about her daughter's upbringing. A red mark immediately appeared on Xiao, she's fair cheek. She clutched her face, the last shred of hope in her heart completely frozen. This was her so-called birth mother. Seeing this, Su Weiwei became even more arrogant, pointing at her nose and shouting that if the soft approach didn't work, they'd use force. She urged her father not to waste time and to force her to hand over the project proposal. Xiaoxi suppressed her anger, stating that she wouldn't give it to them until she saw her grandmother. Su Weiwei thought she was bluffing and cursed as she stepped forward to search her. But her hand grabbed at empty air. Humiliated and enraged, she was about to try again. But she didn't give her the chance. She accurately grabbed her arm and coldly warned, "It's not that easy to grab me." With a scream, Su Weiwei was pinned down, unable to move from the pain. Zhao Yuzhen's face turned pale with fright, and she shrieked for her to let go. Xiaoxi's beautiful face was now frosted over. She only repeated that she wanted to see her grandmother. Just then, the sound of messy footsteps came from the top of the stairs, accompanied by a familiar call, "Dandan." Xiaoxi looked towards the sound and saw her grandmother, her face pale and her body emaciated. Her eyes instantly turned red. But at that moment, Zhao Yuzhen grabbed the old woman's arm and viciously cursed, "You old thing, stop running around." But Grandma Qiao ignored her, her eyes full of heartache as she comforted her granddaughter. She turned and pleaded with Zhao Yuzhen, begging her, for the sake of her own flesh and blood, not to force this poor child anymore. However, not a trace of compassion could be found on Zhao Yuzhen's face. Instead, her fingers tightened, digging cruelly into the old woman's withered arm. She threatened sinisterly that she wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted. Seeing her grandmother suffer, she was frantic. She suddenly grabbed Su Weiwei's throat and roared for them to let go. Su Weiwei was instantly terrified, screaming for her mother's help, looking utterly pathetic. Unexpectedly, Su Heng, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stood up. He mocked her with a disdainful face. "You're still too soft to be ruthless." Then, with inhuman cruelty, he grabbed the old woman's head and slammed it hard against the wall. With a thud, the old woman's forehead instantly bruised. She collapsed without even a whimper. Xiaoxi's heart felt as if it were being torn apart. She instantly let go, screaming sharply no. Su Heng blocked her path, looking down on her and warning her not to play tricks. He prided himself on his years of experience in the business world and was no easy target. After all, to ensure Su Weiwei could successfully latch on a Huabiting, he had already hardened his heart and would not allow any obstacles. Just then, a servant rushed in frantically to announce the arrival of the Hua family's second young master. Hearing this, Su Heng's face was full of disdain. He snorted coldly, saying that his arrival was useless. He was just a cripple about to be cast aside by his family, like a worn-out shoe, incapable of making any waves. "Oh, is that so?" Before his voice had faded, a group of bodyguards in black suits swarmed in like a dark cloud, instantly surrounding the living room. The murderous aura was chilling. At that moment, the man in the wheelchair slowly appeared. He exuded a natural air of arrogance and wantonness. His icy gaze shot straight at Su Heng as he retorted, "Since when do outsiders get to dictate the affairs of the Hua family's women?" She was clearly the only direct disciple of the nation's top medical saint, yet everyone treated her like a wild girl from the countryside. This was only because her master was the long-retired titan of the medical field, and she herself was completely unaware of it. Su Heng looked at the crowd gathering around him, an inexplicable panic rising in his heart. However, Hua Xingzhou's cold eyes swept over the room, finally landing on the pitiful little woman. Where was the ferocity this woman had when she was pulling down his pants? Why was she letting this group of scumbags bully her? His voice was terrifyingly low. "I'll come and take my wife home. Is there a problem?" Xiaoxi abruptly lifted her head. The moment her eyes met the man's, tears were already welling up. At the side, Su Weiwei watched this scene. her expression dazed. He's so handsome. This man was supposed to be hers. Following that, the black-clad bodyguards Hua Xingzhou had brought swarmed forward, unceremoniously pushing Su Heng into a corner. Their actions, however, were incredibly gentle as they helped the old lady up from the floor. Xiaoxi's eyes were red as she said with a sob, "They hit my grandma. We have to go to the hospital right away." Before Hua Xingzhou could respond, she was already carefully helping the old lady walk ahead. The bodyguards pushed Hua Xingzhou's wheelchair, following closely behind. Unexpectedly, as they passed the Su family, Hua Xingzhou suddenly turned his head. "Su Heng, I haven't been disowned by the Hua family yet. It's not your place to act so wildly." Su Heng trembled under his glare, but could only watch them leave. He would wait and see how the Hua family's second branch could continue to be so domineering in the future. After everyone left the Su family home, the group of bodyguards lined up in a well-trained and orderly fashion, boarding a large bus parked on the roadside. Chow, she helped the old lady onto the bus, but couldn't help but look back, her eyes filled with confusion. She couldn't understand it. The Hua family's second branch was clearly in a difficult situation, so where did they get the money to hire so many well-trained bodyguards, even with a dedicated bus? Could this be the trump card that gave Hua Xingzhou his confidence? She hesitated for a moment and had just opened her mouth to ask when Hua Xingzhou threw out a jaw-dropping answer. Actors from film studio. Xiaoxi's eyes widened instantly, and she struggled to get out the word. Actors? The man glanced at her indifferently. This is called using a small stake to win big. All's fair in war. Xiaoxi finally understood. It turned out that hiring a few actors to put on a show didn't cost much. The project she held in her hands was the truly valuable bargaining chip. After figuring it out, she immediately said softly, "Thank you." Hearing this thanks, the stuffiness that had been weighing on Hua Xingzhou's chest inexplicably dissipated. Afterward, the car drove to the hospital. Xiaoxi bustled about, arranging for a hospital room, but the old woman on the bed gently tugged at the corner of Xiaoxi's clothes. "Dandan, I don't want to be hospitalized. Don't worry, I'll be fine if I just go back to the countryside." Xiaoxi looked at the old woman's weathered face, her heart aching. "No, Grandma, you have to listen. The doctor said your illness can be cured." With that, she turned to go pay the fees. The old lady turned to look at the man in the wheelchair, her eyes full of gratitude. "Young Master Hua, thank you for all your trouble today." Hua Xingzhou nodded politely. "She's married to me, after all." The old lady gently wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and sighed slowly. "This child has had a hard life. Her father died early, and her birth mother abandoned her for wealth. She only managed to go to school with the help of kind-hearted people. This child is too sensible and well-behaved." As Hua Xingzhou listened to the old woman's ramblings, his mind was filled with images of Qiao, she touching and feeling him up. He couldn't connect that bold woman with the word well-behaved. The old lady continued. "She has a straightforward personality, unyielding. She doesn't know how to please people. She responds to kindness, not coercion. But if someone shows her a bit of kindness, she wants to repay them tenfold. Young Master Hua, could I ask you to protect her more in the future?" Hua Xingzhou's heart stirred slightly, and as if by some strange impulse, he softly agreed. The cold words on that investigation report now seemed to come to life under the old woman's narration. He seemed to be truly starting to understand this girl. After spending the better part of the day with the old lady, Xiaoxi and Hua Xingzhou finally left the hospital in the evening. The man's deep voice suddenly broke the silence in the car. "Does what you said before still count?" Deep within his dark eyes, an imperceptible trace of anticipation began to spread. "Heal my legs for me." Upon hearing this, Xiaoxi excitedly raised her hand and swore, "It counts, it counts. I promise I'll definitely heal your legs." This time, Hua Xingzhou chose to believe. After all, she was the prized disciple cultivated for years by the national medical saint, Cheng Han. He had no reason not to believe. Then, as if he had just thought of it, he asked who her master was, although he already had a guess in his heart. But he still wanted to hear her confirm it herself. She scratched her clothes, a little embarrassed. "I learned from my neighbor, Grandpa Cheng. Although he's not as famous as the old master Cheng Han, he taught me very diligently. He treated all the people in our village. As expected, this silly girl had no idea what a formidable master she had, let alone that Cheng Han had long since changed his name and was living in seclusion in the countryside. I believe you. The old lady's condition is complex. I found a long-term caregiver to stay with her. You can visit her at the hospital anytime. The medical expenses will be deducted from your consultation fee. Xiaoxi's clear eyes instantly filled with joy. Mr. Hua, I'm truly grateful. Thank you for believing in my medical skills. Hua Xingzhou looked at her foolishly happy expression and spoke meaningfully. Xiaoxi, in the future, they will all have to beg you. Those blind people will eventually pay the price for what they did today. They have no idea what a rare treasure they've missed. Speaking of which, he himself was once one of those blind people. Xiaoxi was completely bewildered. Although she didn't quite understand the twists and turns in his words, she felt that the man's voice was like the shimmering moonlight on a spring night, its ripples gently warming her uneasy heart. Then, Hua Xingzhou's slender fingers held out a thin document to her. Xiao, she subconsciously looked down. The words marriage agreement in bold black letters were particularly striking. She looked closer and saw it clearly written in black and white. The day his legs were fully healed would be the day they parted ways. The maximum term was limited to 3 months. At the same time, as a reward, he would give her a property plus $1 million in cash. If there are no objections, then sign it. I don't like to owe people favors. This also serves as a confidentiality agreement. Little did she know, this was an escape route he had specially drafted for her last night after reviewing the investigation report. Unexpectedly, Xiaoxi just lowered her eyes for a glance, and without a word, swiftly signed her name. Then she looked up, her beautiful almond-shaped eyes curving into crescents, her face full of sincerity. Mr. Hua, it's a pleasure working with you. That smile was utterly captivating. A trace of astonishment flashed in Hua Xingzhou's eyes. The corners of his lips uncontrollably curved up slightly. His heart, which had never been stirred, now felt as if it had been gently brushed by a soft feather, instantly creating a strange ripple. Xiaoxi, this is your choice. The reason for writing this agreement was simply to give her the right to choose, so she wouldn't be tightly bound by this absurd marriage. When that day came, whether she wanted to leave or stay, it would be entirely up to her. Xiaoxi had only gone to the pharmacy to buy medicine, but she unexpectedly saved a man who had fainted on the street. But what she said after saving him almost made the man pass out again on the spot. Just as the two of them stepped into the house, Qianshun hurried over to greet them, her face wreathed in smiles, reporting that young Master Zhou had arrived. Young Master has been waiting for a long time. Before the words could fade, Zhou Yu, the show-off, sauntered out from the living room, his eyes glued to Xiaoxi. Second brother Hua, so this is little sister-in-law? Who would have thought that this was the woman for whom second brother Hua had mobilized his forces, disguised as an extra, to play the hero saving the damsel in distress? Out of basic courtesy, Hua Xingzhou turned his head to introduce Xiaoxi. This is Zhou Yu. He's the kind of insignificant person you wouldn't be able to find in a crowd. You don't need to be polite to him. Zhou Yu immediately blew his top, nearly jumping up and swearing to the heavens, clamoring about how his years of slaving away like an ox and a horse were all for nothing. In truth, he felt incredibly wronged. If it weren't for him constantly providing cover, Hua Xingzhou's other identity would have been completely exposed long ago. Xiaoxi watched the two of them bicker, the corners of her lips turning up. She waved her hand, indicating she would go back to her room to prepare. Watching her slender figure disappear around the bend of the staircase, Zhou Yu immediately changed his tune. He leaned in close to Hua Xingzhou and asked in a low voice, "Is she really the final disciple of that divine doctor, Chang'an?" Good heavens, this is practically a cheat code for the Hua family. Then, as if he had discovered a new continent, he remarked, "This girl actually bears some resemblance to Shui." However, before that name could come out, Hua Xingzhou's face instantly turned as cold as ice. A single, hoarse word escaped his lips. Scram. Zhou Yu shrank back, quickly putting on a placating smile and changing the subject, saying he was here to report on the Tianyuan Group's quarterly earnings. Meanwhile, a full-blown drama was unfolding at the Su family villa. Su Weiwei was so angry her insides were burning. With a backhand, she swept all the bottles and jars from her dressing table to the floor. Panting heavily, she cursed, "Why does Xiaoxi get to marry a man as handsome as Hua Xingzhou?" Her heart was being eaten away by jealousy, yet she desperately tried to brainwash herself, thinking that Hua Xingzhou was just a cripple in a wheelchair. Only Hua Biding was her sole springboard to the top of high society. Just then, the The vibration of her phone broke the silence. Su Weiwei saw the name on the screen and quickly answered the call, crying that Hu Xingzhou was being too unreasonable. But unexpectedly, Hu Baiting on the other end of the line wasn't buying it. His tone was icy as he got straight to the point. He asked if she had gotten the item. He even made a harsh threat. If the Su family couldn't produce the bargaining chip he wanted, this engagement should be called off immediately. Su Weiwei froze on the spot, her mind a complete blank. She hurriedly tried to take credit for having Xiao Shi marry in her place. But Hu Baiting cut her off and hung up. At that moment, a ruthless glint flashed in Su Weiwei's eyes. She quickly called out to him, saying she still had someone who could make Hu Xingzhou kneel and beg. Not only could she make him hand over the project transfer agreement, but she could also make him lose all his dignity. She laid out a secret plan. Hearing it, Hu Baiting's mood changed from gloomy to cheerful. In the end, he even praised Su Weiwei for being ruthless enough. In the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. The driver was already waiting at the door. Seeing Xiao Shi appear, he immediately opened the car door. As soon as Xiao Shi stepped into the car, she suddenly met a pair of eyes as deep as a tranquil pool. Hu Xingzhou was leaning lazily against the backrest. Her heart skipped a beat. She secretly wondered, could it be that this great Buddha had remembered her casual mention of not having a car this morning? Hu Xingzhou's eyelids lifted slightly. He uttered 4 words in a flat tone, "I'll go with you." Xiao Shi's heart skipped a beat. She demurely agreed. This strange feeling of being valued quietly began to grow at her heart. Soon, the car stopped steadily in front of the Chinese medicine hall. Xiao Shi glanced down at his legs and gently reminded him to wait in the car. After all, a place like this was crowded and chaotic, making it inconvenient for him to move. Hu Xingzhou softly agreed. He told her to call him directly if she ran into any trouble. Just as Xiao Shi picked up the wrapped medicinal herbs, a piercing scream suddenly came from inside the hall, saying someone had fainted. Xiao Shi's eyes sharpened. She instantly pushed through the crowd and rushed over, shouting, "Make way, I'm a doctor." On the ground lay a pale young man. Xiao Shi quickly knelt down, telling the surrounding people to disperse, while accurately pressing his acupoints. At this moment, a heckling uncle emerged from the crowd, sarcastically questioning if this young girl was just putting on a show. But in the next second, a miracle happened. The man, who had his eyes tightly shut, slowly came to. The noisy pharmacy instantly fell silent, followed by waves of gasps. The man opened his eyes to see a beautiful and refined face. He was about to speak in a daze when he heard Xiao Shi calmly point out, "You have a kidney deficiency. You're extremely weak. I suggest you find time to go to the hospital for a full physical examination. I wish you a speedy recovery. I'll be taking my leave now." Xiao Shi gave her advice in a calm tone and then got up to leave. Who knew that after hearing this blunt truth, Sun Weiming almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His already pale face flushed red. To make matters worse, a troublemaker in the crowd who loved a good show shouted with a laugh, "Hey kid, the girl is politely saying you're weak. Take a word of advice. You have to use that thing sparingly. The more you overdraw, the worse it gets." And just like that, the surrounding crowd burst into a roar of laughter. Sun Weiming's face turned the color of pig liver. He wished he could perform a disappearing act on the spot. Unexpectedly, in the next second, a lavishly dressed woman pushed through the crowd and rushed in, crying her heart out, "Weiming, my baby." The moment the name Wei Ming was uttered, combined with the earlier topic of kidney deficiency, the expressions of the onlookers instantly became fascinating. All sorts of meaningful gazes landed squarely on the man. Mrs. Sun knelt down in distress, chattering nonstop. "I told you not to take those random medicines. You just wouldn't listen. Now you've hit a wall, haven't you?" Sun Weiming was so embarrassed his toes were curling. He raised his hands to cover his face, his voice squeezed through his fingers. "Mom, I'm begging you, don't shout my full name on the street." Only then did Mrs. Sun come to her senses. She eagerly asked about the whereabouts of the lifesaver, vowing that the Sun family would definitely offer a handsome reward. Sun Weiming raised his finger and pointed across the street. Mrs. Sun followed his gaze. She froze on the spot. Who knew that the lifesaver was the Hua family's new daughter-in-law? This was completely beyond her expectations. At this moment, Xiao Shi didn't notice the gazes from behind her at all. Carrying the heavy medicinal herbs, she quickly got into the car. Hu Xingzhou's deep eyes sized her up as he casually asked why she took so long. Xiao Shi just brushed it off lightly, saying she encountered a small incident. Fortunately, it was all taken care of. Seeing that she didn't want to elaborate, Hu Xingzhou didn't press further. He changed the subject. Enqian just called. She said, "My father and sister have arrived at home." Xiaoxi's fingers holding the medicine bag tightened unconsciously. A trace of nervousness appeared in her eyes. She asked in a low voice if she needed to quickly prepare a gift. But Hua Xingzhou's lips curved into a playful arc. He said frankly that there was no need at all. They should be the ones preparing one for you. She married her disabled husband for good luck, but was spoiled rotten by the wealthy family. Not only did her sister-in-law warmly call her sister-in-law upon meeting, but her father-in-law also gave her a thick red envelope. However, just when she thought her hardships were over, a phone call made the atmosphere drop to freezing point. The moment she stepped into the house, her eyes met a bright and lively figure. The girl rushed over like a gust of wind, directly calling out sister-in-law and introducing herself as Jiao Jiao. Looking at this energetic appearance, Xiaoxi's lips couldn't help but curve upwards. A straightforward, simple-hearted girl like this was the most likable. Then, Hua Jiansheng walked over gently, holding a thick, heavy red envelope. He explained with a kind face that he missed the wedding and not knowing her preferences. He simply wrapped his sentiments in this tacky red paper. Xiaoxi's gaze shifted to Hua Xingzhou. Only after seeing him give a slight nod did she graciously accept the red envelope and thank him softly. Hua Xijiao winked playfully from the side, teasing that her dad's pockets were bulging with plenty of private funds, so sister-in-law should just take it. Who knew this would earn her a chiding glare from second Madame Hua, warning her not to be so disrespectful. But Hua Xijiao, far from restraining herself, was in such a good mood that she brought up the past, saying frankly that Xiaoxi was 100 times better than that woman who fled when disaster struck. She even mentioned how that person ran faster than anyone after the car accident, and to think she was from Xingyue. Just as she was about to finish, second madam Hua suddenly stood up and snapped at her. Hua Xijiao shrank back in fear and quickly fell silent, clearly realizing it was inappropriate to gossip about the previous person in front of Xiaoxi. Xiaoxi silently mulled over the word Xingyue, guessing it might be the Xingyue Foundation that sponsored her education. She secretly planned to find an opportunity to ask Hua Xingzhou about it. Just then, Qin Shun relayed the news that there would be a family dinner at the old residence tonight. Duan also grumbled with displeasure. She had just had an unhappy encounter with Biting's side. Now, they were having a dinner party. Wasn't this obviously a case of the weasel paying a New Year's visit to the chicken? Seeing this, Hua Jiansheng quickly tried to smooth things over and was about to take the phone to refuse. Unexpectedly, before he could say much, his originally calm expression froze inch by inch. Even his fingertips holding the phone trembled slightly. He just stared blankly at the receiver, repeatedly confirming the authenticity of the news. Duan anxiously pressed him for details. Hua Jiansheng took a deep breath and finally said that the old master had found a disciple of the national medical saint, Cheng Han. This person had the ability to cure their son's legs. Duan's earlier resistance instantly vanished, her eyes flashing with a joyful light. She declared decisively that even if it was a treacherous banquet ahead, they had to go. Hua Xijiao was even more excited, jumping up and shouting around the room that her brother's legs could be saved. She subconsciously looked down at the man beside her, a trace of bitterness inevitably rising in her heart. After all, in front of the disciple of such a famous doctor, her own self-taught medical skills seemed rather inadequate. However, there was no joy on Hua Xingzhou's face. Instead, he gripped her wrist tightly and warned her in a low voice that once they arrived at the old residence, she must stand behind him. No matter what happened, she was not to speak easily. Xiaoxi's heart sank. She couldn't understand why an ordinary family dinner would make him act as if he were facing a great enemy. At 6 in the evening, the family of 5 arrived on time at the brightly lit old residence. The house was bustling with people. A high-pitched, shrill voice was bossily urging the servants to be quicker. Duan lowered her voice and leaned into Xiaoxi's ear. She said that this eldest aunt was a notorious penny pincher, difficult and obsessed with appearances, nicknamed Wang Shifeng. Then she gestured for Xiaoxi to look at the seemingly refined, but actually slick eldest uncle, Jianjun, on the sofa. Xiaoxi silently nodded, taking note, knowing that no one in this room was easy to deal with. In a flash, Wang Fengxian turned her head and saw the second branch family. A sarcastic smile instantly appeared on her lips. She deliberately raised her voice, insinuating that Hua Xingzhou was late because of his wheelchair. Duan retorted without hésitation, mocking, that the other's words were as sharp as ever. Who knew that Wang Fengxian would become even more aggressive, sizing up Qiao Shi with a sidelong glance and sneering that a country bumpkin paired with a cripple in a wheelchair was truly a match made in heaven. Qiao Shi's expression instantly darkened. Those piercing words were like a lump in her throat. How could Huasi Jiao tolerate this? She immediately jumped out and retorted, pointing out that her eldest aunt's mouth stank as if she hadn't brushed her teeth, fearing the smell would offend her eldest uncle. Wang Fengxian's face turned from pale to purple at this retort. She suddenly raised her voice, pointing at Huasi Jiao's nose and questioning if the second branch had any manners at all. Who knew that Huasi Jiao would plant her hands on her hips and leisurely retort that she loved nothing more than telling the truth in her life. She even joked that if Manhwa had used her eldest aunt's face to patch the sky would probably never leak. How could Wang Fengxian have ever suffered such ridicule? She suddenly raised her palm to slap her, but Huasi Jiao was quick-witted and dodged, while simultaneously grabbing the other's wrist. In an instant, the entire living room of the old residence echoed with Wang Fengxian's pig-like squeal. Just then, a stern reprimand swept over from the top of the stairs. Everyone looked up to see old Master was slowly appearing with a cane, flanked by a smug biting and a middle-aged man who looked refined but exuded shrewdness. Old Master Hua sternly motioned for everyone to be seated. Then he bluntly proposed that since the eldest branch had gone to the trouble of inviting Cheng Han's personal disciple, the second branch should offer up a project as payment. These words made the members of the second branch feel as if they had been plunged into an ice cave, their hearts filled with resentment. They never expected that even among family, there would be such a clear price tag on a transaction. At this time, the people from the eldest branch couldn't hide their delight upon hearing this. They even deliberately provoked Du Wan with sarcastic remarks, implying that in the eyes of the second branch, their son's legs were less important than a bit of business. On one side was her son's fate, on the other was her son's life's work. This was clearly forcing her to make a choice. Duan stated that as long as her son's legs could be healed, she would give up the project. But the prerequisite was that they must confirm this doctor's true abilities. Old Master Hua snorted coldly and gestured for the doctor to begin. In the next second, the man named Zhuofeng respectfully walked to the wheelchair, knelt down, and pressed hard on acupoint on Hua Xingzhou's leg. Qiao Shi watched with bated breath, only to discover that the man was forcefully rubbing the Zisomli acupoint. He was attempting to disperse the stagnant blood in the body. But because she was well aware of Hua Xingzhou's current pulse, with his meridians weak, applying forceful pressure at this time would only be counterproductive. It could even worsen his condition to an irreparable state. Thus, Qiao Shi could no longer care about her status or the occasion. She stood up and shouted for the man to stop. The man had clearly been clamoring for a divorce just after waking up, but now he could only watch helplessly as his wife was snatched away by his sister, because this seemingly delicate girl could not only heal his paralyzed legs, but even made a top-tier wealthy family relocate their ancestral graves with just a word from her. The entire family praised her to the skies. Only then did the man belatedly realize that he had married his own personal lucky star. Qiao Shi, seeing Zhuofeng's rough movements, was just about to speak up and stop him, when countless meaningful gazes instantly pinned her to the spot. Zhuofeng's lips curved into a disdainful smile as he asked if she was trying to teach him, an old hand who had studied medicine for decades, how to do his job. At the same time, the Hua family's eldest branch also began to sneer, even suspecting that this little country girl was afraid that once Hua Xingzhou's legs were healed, she would be ruthlessly kicked out of this wealthy family. Qiao Shi's breath caught in her throat, and she was anxiously trying to explain, but unexpectedly, a large, well-defined hand was faster. Hua Xingzhou's fingertips pinched a steaming hot pastry and stuffed it into her mouth without room for refusal, silencing all her words. He leisurely took a napkin, meticulously wiped the grease from between his fingers, and instructed her with a calm expression to taste it. Qiao Shi met the man's eyes, which were as deep as a tranquil pool, and suddenly remembered his instructions at home. She decided that no matter what happened, she would just stand behind him and remain silent. So, No, she silently swallowed the pastry, deciding to unconditionally trust this unfathomable man. At this moment, Hua Xingzhou nonchalantly gestured for Dr. Zhua to continue, casually explaining that his wife was young and hadn't seen much of the world. Zhua Feng snorted through his nose, putting on an air of giving face to the second master. Then, he exerted force with his palm and pressed hard on Hua Xingzhou's leg. Hua Xingzhou's brows furrowed slightly. Although he was polite on the surface, he knew clearly in his heart that this old man's technique was a world away from Qiao Shi's. Then, Zhua Feng suddenly stood up, faced old Master Hua in the main seat, and patted his chest, guaranteeing that this was a piece of cake for him. Hua Biding impatiently took out the transfer agreement, urging his cousin to sign it quickly. However, watching from his side, Xiaoxi's heart not only ached but also felt pained. This was clearly an illness she could also cure, yet Hua Xingzhou insisted on giving up such a large project. Could it be that in his heart, he was still unwilling to trust the person sleeping next to him? But Hua Xingzhou paid no mind to her turmoil. He took the pen and directly signed his name. After getting the contract, Hua Biding became even more arrogant, mocking Hua Xingzhou for not even being able to handle such a small matter. Wang Fengxian also grinned from ear to ear, boasting that her son and President's son were best buddies, and that such a small matter could be resolved in minutes. Who knew that as soon as she finished speaking, Hua Biding's phone started vibrating wildly. He showily waved it around and put on speaker, wanting to publicly humiliate the second branch. President Sun's gruff voice immediately echoed through the living room, proposing to relocate for the future city project. Hua Biding's face was filled with triumph, just as he was about to accept the credit. But the other party's next words stunned the entire room. President Sun frankly stated that he was only agreeing to this entirely as a favor to the second branch's Qiao Shi. He even wanted to treat the couple to dinner another day. In that instant, the living room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. Hua Xijiao didn't miss this opportunity and started her mockery mode in public, asking how much her cousin's face was actually worth. Although Du Wan loudly reprimanded her, the smile at the corner of her eyes was impossible to hide. Hua Xingzhou calmly thanked his cousin for introducing the doctor. Then, he led his whole family to leave quickly. In a flash, the old master's furious roar exploded in the room, cursing the eldest branch for being useless freeloaders. Hua Biding's fingers turned white with anger. He gritted his teeth and dialed Sun Weiming's number to question him. But he learned that she had miraculously saved Sun Weiming at the pharmacy, becoming the Sun family's lifesaver. Hua Biding was dismissive of this, instigating that it was just a case of a blind cat catching a dead mouse. Just then, Hua Jianjun spoke up, mentioning that with the project gone, the second branch had completely lost its foundation for inheritance. The originally gloomy Hua Biding's eyes instantly lit up with wild joy upon hearing that the old master planned to formally hand over power at his birthday banquet. A venomous glint flashed in Hua Jianjun's eyes. Even if the old master didn't make the announcement then, he had his own ways to ensure the eldest branch would secure the position. A cruel curve appeared on Hua Biding's lips. He was certain that sickly Hua Xingzhou wouldn't live much longer anyway. Hua Jianjun snorted coldly in deep agreement. In his eyes, Dr. Zhua was an excellent blade that could kill without leaving a trace. As long as the person was under their control, the second branch could never turn the tables. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Hua family's small villa was a different, warm scene. Du Wan let out a long sigh of relief, the comfort in her eyes impossible to hide. Even though they had lost a major project this time, seeing that there was finally hope for her son's legs to heal, in her eyes, as long as the whole family was together, it was more reassuring than any mountain of gold or silver. Hua Jiansheng nodded repeatedly upon hearing this, saying he had long since stopped caring about those empty titles of power and profit. A family without illness or disaster is what's truly real. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he looked at his son with a puzzled expression, unable to understand why that arrogant young master son would do a favor for his daughter-in-law. Hua Xingzhou pondered for a moment before slowly revealing the mystery. A few days ago, he was out on business, and Xiaoxi happened to see young Master Sun faint and offered her help. The big fuss the Sun family was making this time was clearly their way of trying to repay this lifesaver. Thank you. Duan, listening on the side, was all smiles, endlessly praising Qiao Shi. She mentioned that even the usually picky Qian Shun had nothing but praise for Qiao Shi's techniques. Not to mention, all the Chinese medicines for his recuperation were personally selected and brewed by her. This sincerity, as if she would give her own heart, was truly protecting Xingzhou to the core. Hua Xijiao's eyes lit up as she listened. She grabbed Qiao Shi's hand tightly and excitedly declared that her sister-in-law was simply an all-powerful goddess, and she was determined to cling to this thigh. Qiao Shi was so praised her cheeks flushed, and she mumbled that it was just good luck. Hua Xingzhou watched her intently, the long silent lake in his heart rippling. He suddenly discovered that this seemingly fragile girl was truly his exclusive lucky star. He noticed the doubt in Qiao Shi's eyes and was planning to find a chance later to clear up the misunderstanding with her alone. Who knew that before his fingertips could even touch the corner of her clothes, Hua Xijiao had already dragged Qiao Shi and rushed up to the second floor. As the girl ran, she shouted that she was determined to monopolize her sister-in-law tonight. Finally, she didn't forget to complain that her own brother was a boring blockhead. Hua Xingzhou watched helplessly as her figure disappeared around the corner of the stairs, his hand suspended in mid-air, ultimately grasping nothing. Seeing him in this predicament, Duan and Hua Jinshen couldn't help but laugh out loud together. Duan even deliberately brought up old scores to tease him. I wonder who it was that was clamoring for a divorce as soon as he woke up, hitting Hua Xingzhou right where it hurt. Since there was hope for their son's leg injury, the old couple tacitly reached an agreement. They decided to move back to the old residence to give the young couple enough private space. Hua Xingzhou helplessly rubbed his brow, looking at his empty palm and starting to worry. What method could he possibly use to appease that little lucky star who was still angry? Qiao Shi had clearly married her own benefactor, but was completely unaware of it. She even swore in front of him that she would definitely find and repay the mysterious person who had sponsored her to leave the mountains back then. And his casual act of kindness back then had become the light that guided her forward. Just as a teasing smile appeared on Duwan's lips, Qian Shun hurried over, unintentionally rescuing Hua Xingzhou. Qian Shun lowered her voice and informed the young master that young Master Zhou had been waiting in the study for quite some time. Watching her son's retreating figure, Duwan couldn't help but sigh with emotion that her family had married a considerate and sensible good wife. Qian Shun also chimed in, praising the two as a perfect match of talent and beauty, even feeling that the young madam was 100 times better than the one from the Su family. Who knew that upon hearing the surname Su, Duwan's expression instantly darkened. She coldly snapped at Qian Shun, not to mention that unlucky person again, scaring Qian Shun into silence. The atmosphere in the study, however, was completely different. Zhou Yu asked with a face full of suspicion if that major project had really been transferred to Hua Baiting. Hua Xingzhou's expression was calm. If I don't let him taste some sweetness, how can I watch him climb high and fall hard? Hearing this, Zhou Yu's jaw dropped. Then he revealed a playful smile. This move of feigning retreat to advance was truly brilliant. After all, there was a landmine buried in that project, just waiting for Hua Baiting to jump in. Not only could they get rid of the burden, but they could even make Tian Yuan Group turn against them with a breach of contract penalty. Thinking of the scene of the eldest branch crying and wailing soon, Zhou Yu couldn't help but give a thumbs up, exclaiming that Hua Xingzhou's methods were ruthless and brilliant. Hua Xingzhou lowered his gaze, his palm slamming onto the wheelchair armrest and clenching into a fist. He hadn't forgotten that car accident for a single moment. That was the eldest branch meticulously plotting to take his life. If Qiao Shi hadn't risked her life to save him back then, his legs would have probably rotted away long ago. At the same time, Zhou Yu's old face suddenly leaned in close, grinning like a sly fox. He not only asked how he planned to repay her for saving his life, but his thoughts even strayed to matters between men and women. The rumors outside said that young Master Hua was incapable in that department. Zhou Yu boldly tried to find out the truth, and with a wicked smile, probed whether he had any desire for his wife. A cold, fierce glint flashed in Hua Xingzhou's eyes. This guy's head was really full of junk. Seeing his face turn livid, Zhou Yu realized he had stepped on a landmine, so he quickly slapped his own mouth and changed the topic. He then worried about Qiao Shi's situation, afraid that the eldest branch's people would follow the clues and find out her background. But Hua Xingzhou appeared calm, and composed. The people from the eldest branch had always been arrogant. They would never have imagined that she was actually Chang Han's direct disciple. Next, Zhou Yu mentioned the crippled legs that even top experts were helpless against. Plus, Xiaoxi had also saved that blockhead son Wei Ming. Hua Xingzhou, however, didn't think much of it. As a doctor, it was Xiaoxi's duty to save people. He would use all means to protect her completely. At the same time, he warned Zhou Yu to keep his mouth shut. Zhou Yu nodded, then asked if they had to hide it, even from the family elders. Hua Xingzhou stroked his knees with a heavy gaze. The truth would only be revealed to the world on the day he could stand up again. In the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. Xiaoxi had prepared everything early and began to treat Hua Xingzhou on time. The man sat quietly in his wheelchair. His gaze was constantly locked on that small, busy figure. He saw her lips pressed tightly together, her face full of displeasure. At this time, the family elders had all gone out. It was a great opportunity to coax her. Unexpectedly, just as he uttered a single word, she abruptly stood up. She turned around and switched on the LCD TV on the wall. The loud sound from the TV instantly drowned out his voice. Hua Xingzhou was rebuffed and felt that this young lady was really too temperamental. Just then, Hua Xingzhou's brows suddenly furrowed tightly, and he let out a pained grunt. Hearing the sound, she spun around abruptly. Seeing him like this, she was instantly flustered and urgently asked where it was uncomfortable. The next second, before she could react, she was pulled forcefully by Hua Xingzhou and crashed directly into his broad embrace. She was forced to straddle his lap. She struggled out of embarrassment, but Hua Xingzhou's arms were like iron bars, tightly wrapped around her waist. In a deep voice, he demanded she listen to his explanation before leaving. She turned her head away, aggrieved. She accused him of not trusting her, preferring to trade a project for someone else's treatment. Hua Xingzhou let out a soft chuckle at this, explaining that Zhuo Feng was just a spy planted by the eldest branch. Giving away the project was just to lure the snake out of its hole. It was precisely because he believed in her medical skills that he needed her to cooperate and put on a good show of deceiving everyone. The anger in Xiaoxi's heart finally subsided. Instead, she became curious about the plan. Hua Xingzhou instructed her not to reveal her astonishing medical skills in front of outsiders until he could stand up. Xiaoxi obediently agreed. That look of a pure, shy little lamb made Hua Xingzhou's heart tremble. At this moment, Zhou Yu's suggestive words involuntarily came to mind. How could he possibly not have feelings for her? She shyly pounded on his chest. She urged him to let go quickly. The treatment wasn't finished yet. Afterwards, she knelt down, her fingertips skillfully massaging the man's legs. The feeling of being enveloped by a scorching gaze left her with nowhere to hide. The blush on her face grew even more brilliant. At the same time, a news report came from the wall-mounted TV. The founder of the Crescent Moon Foundation's identity remains a mystery, yet they have sponsored countless impoverished students. Xiaoxi listened, somewhat entranced. Suddenly, she remembered that Hua Xingzhou seemed to have mentioned this name too. She couldn't help but sigh that she was once one of the beneficiaries. Back then, it was thanks to that mysterious person's sponsorship that the children of Moon Village were able to leave the mountains and complete their studies. Because of this, she had always longed to be able to thank that benefactor in person. Hua Xingzhou's gaze instantly became deep and complex. He asked her in an unreadable tone what she wanted to do. The words "repay the kindness" came from her mouth. Her clear, water-like eyes were filled with sincerity. Hua Xingzhou never expected that a random act of kindness from back then would become the light that supported her journey forward. As if bewitched, he couldn't help but reach out and rub her soft hair. Instantly, an indescribable ambiguity grew wildly in the quiet air. Xiaoxi's heart pounded wildly. She wanted to tentatively ask if Hua Xingzhou was that person. The woman was clearly treating her husband in the wheelchair with good intentions, yet she was almost eaten alive by him, only because she secretly added extra ingredients to her husband's medicine every day. She thought it would help him, but she didn't know that not only was the man not sick, he was also being aroused by her to the point of losing control. This crucial question, "Mr. Hua, "Are you that person?" was right on the tip of Qiao Shi's tongue. However, before she could utter it, a sudden knock on the door abruptly shattered the delicate atmosphere. Immediately after, Qian Shun's loud voice came through the door. "Young master, the Sun family is here." The ambiguous feelings that had been growing in the silence were instantly dispersed by the sudden interruption. Hua Xingzhou responded in a deep voice to acknowledge. Qiao Shi quickly steadied her mind, flusteredly straightened his collar, and whispered that she would push him downstairs. That small hand, as fair as a spring onion, rested on his collar. At this moment, a long-lost jealousy surged in Hua Xingzhou's heart. But thinking of Zhou Yu's bastardly words, he clenched his jaw and forcibly suppressed this restlessness. When Xiao Shi appeared in the living room, pushing Hua Xingzhou, the gazes of the Sun mother and the Sun shot over in unison. Mrs. Sun greeted them gracefully and properly. Unexpectedly, the moment Sun Weiming next to her saw Xiao Shi, his cheeks instantly turned as red as a ripe tomato. He stammered and couldn't get a word out. Mrs. Sun was a straightforward person. Without another word, she took out a 500,000 check and handed it over, saying with sincere words, "If not for young Madame Hua's help, the consequences would have been unimaginable. You must accept this check." Xiao Shi was startled and waved her hands repeatedly, declining, saying it was just a small effort. Who knew Mrs. Sun would raise her eyebrows and ask if she thought it was too little. Her posture suggested that if Xiao Shi dared to nod, she would increase the amount tenfold in the next second. Hua Xingzhou was well aware of the Sun family style of throwing money at people. He stretched out his long arm, intercepted the check, and forcibly stuffed it into Qiao Shi's hand, domineeringly saying that since it was given, she should take it. After all, young Master Sun's life is priceless. But at that moment, Sun Weiming hid behind his mother and cautiously probed if second young Master Hua was really incapable, as the rumor said. He even felt sorry for Qiao Shi for having to be a living widow. Mrs. Sun was so angry she wished she could sew her son's mouth shut on the spot, and sharply rebuked him for talking nonsense. But Sun Weiming held his head, looking aggrieved, and whined that he just wanted to ask Xiao Shi to treat his illness. What if a couple of massages could fix it? After all, what man would be willing to bear the burden of a hidden illness and be mocked for years? Qiao Shi lightly bit her lip, her moist eyes filled with difficulty. Although Sun Weiming looked pitiful, she had promised Hua Xingzhou to hide her talents. Helpless, she reached out a finger and secretly hooked Hua Xingzhou's arm. The man took the opportunity to grasp her hand in return, caressing the back of her exquisite hand. Then, in her palm, he wrote stroke by stroke the words "you can." Qiao Shi glanced at Hua Xingzhou gratefully. She turned to Sun Weiming and said there was a health regimen he could try. Hearing this, Sun Weiming was like a man who had grasped a life-saving straw, nodding his head like pounding garlic. He immediately took out his phone to add her on WeChat and delightedly saved Qiao Shi's contact name as Fairy. Although Mrs. Sun sighed on the side, feeling this was another useless effort, Qiao Shi still confidently sent the information over, instructing that this was a secret recipe passed down from her master. Sun Weiming treated it like a priceless treasure, solemnly promising to send a silk banner if he was cured. Only then did he leave with his phone, satisfied. The living room became quiet again. However, Hua Xingzhou's deep eyes were now like X-rays, as if wanting to see right through Qiao Shi. Under this immense pressure, Qiao Shi quickly explained that the prescription was slow-acting and needed to be kept secret. But the man indifferently maneuvered his wheelchair closer, curious as to why she was even skilled at treating this kind of illness. Qiao Shi's ears turned red, and she subconsciously took a few steps back, frantically reassuring Hua Xingzhou not to worry. She confessed that she had specially added nourishing, kidney-strengthening herbs to his Chinese medicine these past 2 days. After all, men care about this. As long as he drank it for a period of time to replenish his qi and blood, the effects of the car accident wouldn't be significant. After hearing this, Hua Xingzhou was so angry he laughed. To think he thought his self-control was lacking, and he had been aroused by Zhou Yu's words. He never expected the culprit to be this bowl of medicine. He suddenly shot out his right hand, dominantly and fiercely grabbing Qiao Shi's wrist and pulled her in front of him. Through gritted teeth, he questioned, "Who taught you to add herbs randomly? Do you know what a man with surging qi and blood would do?" She was forced against his chest, feeling the man's rising and falling breath, and her cheeks were instantly flushed. She struggled while defending herself, saying it was a doctor's duty. Then she forcefully pried his fingers open, not daring to look directly into those deep, dark eyes. She threw out a line about going to brew medicine and fled in disarray. Hua Xingzhou took a deep breath, trying hard to suppress the restlessness in his body, and silently mocked himself for getting worked up over an innocent little girl. But he was very curious. Just how many people had she done this common thing she spoke of to? At this moment, hiding in the kitchen, Xiaoxi's heart was pounding like thunder. She thought to herself that Hua Xingzhou must have reacted so strongly because his pride was hurt. After her breathing stabilized, she threw the herbs into the pot. After hesitating for a moment, Grandpa Chang's teachings surfaced in her mind. Men being treated for hidden illnesses are prone to becoming angry from embarrassment. Doctors need to be more understanding. So, as if possessed, she grabbed another handful of nourishing herbs and threw them in. Just then, the phone in her pocket buzzed. She took it out and saw that the class group chat was buzzing with discussion about a reunion dinner. Someone had specifically tagged her. She wanted to ignore it and turn off the screen. Unexpectedly, her college roommate Yi Man bombarded her with private messages, using the "we'll all go our separate ways after graduation" sob story. She clutched her phone and hesitated for a long time before finally replying that she would go. The man was clearly strong and healthy, yet his new wife forced him to drink kidney-nourishing medicine every day. Hua Xingzhou was lounging lazily on a rattan chair on the bedroom terrace. Reading a book, he saw Xiaoxi carrying the medicine bowl and walking softly to his side. The air was instantly filled with a faint, bitter smell of Chinese medicine. Hua Xingzhou's eyelids lifted slightly. He casually placed the book face down on his lap, his deep gaze sweeping towards her. It was as if he was asking whether she had added that kidney-nourishing herb. She lowered her head like a child who had done something wrong and admitted it with slightly hot cheeks. But she was annoyed with herself. Why did I have to be so honest and say it directly? It makes it seem like I'm so eager. Unexpectedly, Hua Xingzhou suddenly reigned in his coldness. His slender fingers steadily picked up the medicine bowl, and he tilted his head back and drank it all in one go. His deep voice carried a hint of apology, saying that he shouldn't have lost his temper with her just now. Since this little girl was convinced he had a kidney deficiency, he would let her continue with this misunderstanding for now. She stared at him for a good while, the corners of her mouth unable to stop curving up. She praised him, saying he was great, and even called him the most obedient patient she had ever met. Immediately after, she took out the 500,000 check as if presenting a treasure. She solemnly stuffed it into Hua Xingzhou's warm palm, hoping he could donate it to the Crescent Moon Foundation on her behalf. It turned out she had asked Qianshun while brewing the medicine and already knew that the man before her was the benefactor who had sponsored her education. It was he who let that beam of light shine into her life, allowing her to avoid dropping out of school. Perhaps it was because he had just drunk the medicine, being watched by the girl's clear and bright eyes. A trace of unprecedented satisfaction arose in Hua Xingzhou's heart, and even gave rise to some of the secret thoughts that only an adult man would understand. The words rolled around on the tip of his tongue, and finally carried a hint of subtle probing, asking her if she wanted to repay his kindness. Who knew? Xiaoxi completely missed the ambiguity in the man's words, and instead confidently promised that she would definitely make him stand up again. As soon as the words fell, Xiaoxi blushed in embarrassment, realizing she had been a bit too excited just now. A light chuckle escaped Hua Xingzhou's throat. A hint of teasing flashed in his eyes as he pointed out that they were both patients, yet only Sun Weiming got to add her contact information. This is a bit too biased. So, Xiaoxi flusteredly took out her phone and showed her QR code. She said she was going to class reunion in 2 days and that he could contact her anytime. After adding her as a friend, Hua Xingzhou was curious what she would save his contact name as. Just then, a knock suddenly sounded at the door. Qianshun loudly announced that Dr. Zhua had arrived. Hearing this name, Xiaoxi stiffened, her guard instantly raised to the maximum. That's a rotten apple with terrible medical ethics. He absolutely cannot be allowed to harm Hua Xingzhou. Hua Xingzhou patted the back of her hand reassuringly, signaling her to remain calm. Meanwhile, led by Qian Shun, Zhuo Feng arrogantly went up to the second floor. Looking at the cold and cheerless villa with only one servant, he couldn't help but sneer inwardly that the second branch had indeed declined. How could it compare to the grandeur of the eldest branch? But the moment he saw Qiao Shi, the disgust in his eyes was no longer concealed. He rudely shooed her away, bluntly saying he doesn't like outsiders present during treatment, especially this kind of self-righteous medical student who hasn't even graduated. Qiao Shi suppressed her anger and said she wouldn't disturb him. However, Zhuo Feng spoke even more sarcastically, mocking her for trying to steal his techniques. He brought out his title as a disciple of the god of medicine, Cheng Han, and asserted that she would never witness such brilliant techniques in her lifetime. Hua Xingzhou, however, was very calm. He pulled Qiao Shi to his side, their fingers intertwined, and playfully said that as newlyweds, they were thick as thieves and couldn't be separated for a moment. Qiao Shi's face instantly turned beet red. What nonsense is this man talking? It's so embarrassing for others to hear. Zhuo Feng snorted coldly and had no choice but to compromise and let her stay, thinking to himself that this woman's aptitude was mediocre anyway, so she couldn't steal any skills. Hua Xingzhou said his thanks, but inwardly, he was about to burst out laughing. Besides Cheng Han himself, no one knew Qiao Shi's talent better than he did. This imposter before him was ridiculously arrogant. Then, Zhuo Feng began to massage the legs. Qiao Shi stared intently at his technique, silently reciting acupoints like Zusanli, Chung Fu, etc. in her mind. Only then did she discover that although the technique looked profound, it was actually mediocre and not a genuine treatment at all. Seeing this, Hua Xingzhou shook his head discreetly. After finishing everything, Zhuo Feng left behind a pack of herbs for a medicinal bath and left with his medical kit. He proclaimed he would be back in 3 days. The next second, Qiao Shi immediately tore open the herb pack. She wrinkled her nose and sniffed it carefully, picking out 2 herbs from inside that had been tampered with. She concluded with a grave expression that although the massage was fine, this medicine is actually poison.